The first thing I heard that morning wasn't birds or wind. It was pounding on the front gate. 3 black SUVs sat outside the mansion I'd spent 2 years restoring. My hands still smelled like varnish and old oak dust when the man at the front held up a paper and said, "You owe the HOA $200,000 in back fees. Pay up or we'll have this structure condemned." I blinked. Condemned? This house isn't even under your HOA. Behind him stood Karen, clipboard in hand, fake smile plastered on. "It is now," she said. "The association expanded its jurisdiction. This land falls under our authority." I laughed. That's not how property law works. The sheriff's badge glinted, but something about it looked wrong. No county logo, no name tag. "Sir," he said flatly, "if you resist, we'll bring demolition equipment. You'll lose everything." My wife stepped beside me, holding her phone up. "Already recording," she said. "Say that again for the internet." Karen's fake politeness cracked. "This isn't social media, this is enforcement." "Then you won't mind if I call the real sheriff," I said, pulling out my own phone. That made them freeze. The man's badge didn't match any local precinct. Within minutes, 2 real deputies arrived, lights flashing. They looked at the paperwork, then at me. One shook his head. "These aren't our men. This is a scam, and a serious one." Karen tried to back away, mumbling, "I was told it was legal." But it was too late. The deputies took the fake sheriff into custody right there, and Karen's clipboard clattered to the ground. On it was a contract, with her signature, authorizing enforcement fees. I turned to her and said, "You wanted to destroy my house? Turns out, you just destroyed your own reputation." As they led her away, one of the deputies said quietly to me, "Beautiful home you've got here, sir. Glad it's still standing." I nodded. It's not just standing, it's surviving. The next morning, the whole town was buzzing. Local news vans parked along the street, and reporters kept trying to get a shot of the mansion that HOA tried to demolish. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors, city inspectors, even a lawyer I'd never met offering to represent me for free. But the HOA board didn't stay quiet long. By noon, I received a thick envelope, official HOA notice. Inside was a statement full of lies. The homeowner engaged in aggressive behavior, obstructing lawful property inspections and fabricating events for online attention. HOA management denies any connection to impersonated officers. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the papers. They're pretending it never happened. My wife leaned over my shoulder. They always double down before they fall apart. And she was right. That same afternoon, one of the deputies, the real ones, came by with an update. "Sir, we ran the uniforms from yesterday. They trace back to a private security company registered under the HOA president's cousin's name." "So Karen's boss hired them?" I asked. He nodded. "And used HOA funds to pay for it." That was the spark that lit the fire. The county launched an audit. Homeowners started demanding to see the books. Within 48 hours, the HOA office was surrounded by furious residents waving overdue refund letters. Karen, of course, tried to save herself. She showed up at my gate again, wearing sunglasses and an unearned sense of confidence. "Listen, this is getting out of hand. We can make a deal. If you drop the complaint, I'll get the HOA to forgive your fees." "My fees?" I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm. "Karen, I don't owe your HOA a single cent." She smirked. "Everyone owes something." "Not me, but you will." Her fake smile twitched, and for the first time she looked scared. "You're making a mistake, you know. People like me, we always win." I glanced over her shoulder at the news van pulling up to the curb. "Not today." The cameras caught everything. Her face, her words, her desperation. By evening, the footage went viral. Comment sections lit up with one line over and over again. He bought a house, she bought her own downfall. The next day, the county froze the HOA's accounts pending investigation. Karen vanished, her house empty by dawn, but something told me this wasn't over yet. 2 days later, a county investigator named Laura knocked on my door. She looked tired but sharp, the kind of person who's been piecing together lies for too long. She laid a folder on my dining table and said, "Mr. Reynolds, what I'm about to show you might explain why that HOA wanted your house gone so badly." Inside were scanned documents, maps, zoning plans, and an old deed with a seal that matched the one hanging in my foyer. This mansion sits on land the HOA has been claiming as part of their historic expansion project. I frowned. That project was canceled 15 years ago. "Exactly," she said, "but the HOA kept collecting state development grants anyway, using fake signatures and forged permits tied to your property." I leaned back in my chair. "So they built their empire on my land?" She nodded. "And if your ownership records went missing or your house was condemned, they could cash out without anyone asking questions." It hit me then. This wasn't about power. It was about money. That night, I went down to the basement where I'd stored all the original papers from the renovation, every inspection, permit, and deed. I had the proof they needed. And one thing about being a Navy man turned builder, I don't lose track of evidence. The next morning, I walked into the county hall with a box under my arm. Karen was already there, sitting with two lawyers and the HOA president, a tall, smug man named Curtis, who used to own half the town's construction contracts. He turned when he saw me. "You again. You've caused quite the mess." I smiled. "Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you." The county clerk started the meeting and I slid the folder across the table. "That's the original land deed, notarized, registered, and sealed before your HOA even existed. Every single payment you took from the state for this land was theft." Curtis went pale. Karen stared straight ahead, her fingers twisting in her lap. The county clerk's assistant whispered something to Laura, who turned to them both and said, "You two might want to stay seated. The sheriff's office just issued a warrant for financial fraud and property extortion." The room fell silent except for the scratch of her pen. Curtis slammed his fist on the table. "You think you've won?" I leaned forward just enough for him to hear. "No. I know I've built something you can't tear down." When they stood to escort him out, Karen tried to plead her way out. "I didn't know! He told me!" Laura cut her off. "You signed the payments, Ms. Whitmore." And just like that, the whole thing unraveled. Outside, reporters were waiting. One of them shoved a mic toward me. "Mr. Reynolds, what do you plan to do now that the HOA has been exposed?" I looked back at the mansion, sunlight glinting off the newly restored windows. "I'm going to finish what I started, bringing this place back to life, because the past deserves better than people who fake authority to control it." That line hit the headlines by nightfall. He restored more than a mansion. He restored justice. A week later, I thought it was over. The charges stuck, the HOA's office was boarded up, and the mansion finally felt like a home again. My wife and I were painting the upstairs hallway when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel outside. I looked out the window and saw her. Karen. She wasn't in her usual neat blazer or heels. Her hair was a mess, and her eyes looked hollow, like someone who hadn't slept in days. She stood at the gate for a moment before walking straight up the driveway, ignoring the private property sign I'd nailed to the fence. My wife tensed beside me. "Don't," she whispered. "Let the sheriff handle it." But I knew I needed to hear what she had to say, if only to end it properly. I met her halfway down the path. The air was thick, still, like the world was holding its breath. "I lost everything," she said, her voice shaking. "My job, my house, my name. They think I was the mastermind, but I was just following orders. Curtis promised—" "Stop," I cut in. "You had a choice every single time you threatened a family, every time you forged a paper, every time you tried to break me." She took a step closer. "You don't understand. They'll come after you next." "Who?" I asked. "The investors behind Curtis," she said quietly. "The people who funded the HOA expansions. They wanted your land for a reason. It's sitting on a development zone worth millions. That's why Curtis needed your house gone. He was just a middleman." For a moment, I didn't know if she was lying again or trying to save herself. But then she handed me something, a small flash drive.
Everything's on there. The contracts, the bank accounts, the shell companies. They'll come for it. And for you." Before I could respond, a car screeched to a halt at the gate. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. No badges, no words, just movement. Karen's eyes widened. "It's them!" I pulled her behind me as one of the men shouted, "Hand it over!" My instincts kicked in. I hit the panic button on my phone, the one wired directly to the sheriff's office after the fake cop incident. Sirens blared in the distance within seconds. The men froze, realized they were out of time, and bolted back into their car. Karen dropped to her knees, shaking. "I told you, they don't stop." I crouched beside her. "Maybe not, but I do." When the deputies arrived, she handed over the flash drive herself. For the first time, she didn't argue, didn't blame. She just said quietly, "I thought power made me safe. I was wrong." The sheriff nodded to me. "You just cracked something bigger than anyone thought. This goes way past an HOA." As they drove her away, I looked back at my mansion, the one she'd tried to destroy, still standing tall against the setting sun. My wife came out and slipped her hand into mine. "What now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "we finish rebuilding, not just the house, the truth." That night, the flash drive's data hit the news. The HOA scandal became a national story. Developers, bribes, fake land grabs, and my name was cleared for good. The closing line everyone remembered came from my last interview. They tried to bury me under lies, but they forgot I'm the one who knows how to dig. Months passed. The mansion that once stood silent under dust and broken glass was now alive again. The walls gleamed, the gardens bloomed, and laughter echoed through the halls like the place had never seen darkness. My wife started calling it the lighthouse, saying it stood tall even when surrounded by storms. But peace never stays quiet long. One crisp morning I woke up to find a plain envelope on the porch. No address, no stamp, just one word scribbled across it. Unfinished. Inside was a photo. My wife and I standing in front of the mansion, except the image had been taken from the woods behind the house. Someone had been watching us. I walked the perimeter, scanning the trees. Nothing but stillness. But I'd learned long ago that silence doesn't mean safety. That evening, Sheriff Daniels stopped by with an update. We followed the leads from that flash drive, those shell companies. Turns out they were tied to a development firm from out of state. The CEO vanished right after the scandal broke. "Vanished?" I repeated. "Left everything. But get this, he's Curtis's brother." I froze. "You're kidding." "Wish I was," Daniel said. "They were running a land flip scam across 3 counties. Your property was the centerpiece. Without your house gone, they couldn't claim the full zone for redevelopment." It all made sense now. The threats, the forged papers, the fake cops. My mansion wasn't the problem. It was the obstacle. Later that night, I found myself on the porch again, staring out into the darkness where the woods swallowed the edge of my land. The air smelled like rain and fresh soil, and then a light flickered between the trees. Someone was out there. I grabbed the flashlight and moved closer. The beam cut through the mist, and there, half buried in mud, was a small metal sign, rusted, old, but readable. Property of Cedar Holdings, 1989. The same company listed in the files from the flash drive. I felt a chill crawl up my neck. That company didn't just want the land, they already believed they owned it. The next morning, I took the sign to the county clerk's office. After a few hours of searching through archives, the clerk looked up at me, pale. "Sir, this deed wasn't fake. The company really did own part of this area until it was seized by the government in 1991. "Seized for what?" I asked. He hesitated. "Toxic waste contamination. The ground under your property was supposed to be sealed off permanently." I stepped back, the room spinning. The mansion wasn't sitting on valuable real estate. It was sitting on buried evidence. By the time I got home, 2 unmarked cars were already parked outside the gate. This wasn't over. It had just shifted into something far more dangerous. They didn't want my house. They wanted what's underneath it.